Welcome back to the Explanation Pro. Today I'll recap an action, sci-fi film called Darkman. Spoilers incoming. In a warehouse by a port, a city gangster named Ellie Black is speaking aggressively to someone on his telephone. He is then informed by one of his men about a certain someone who threatens to take away his property from him. As another group of gangsters arrives, with Robert Durant being their boss, Ellie's men start to search them up for their firearms and weapons. Seeing that they are clear from attempting any harm, they are escorted inside the warehouse to meet with Ellie. He then starts to make fun of them and threatens them of cutting their private parts, if they are ever unsatisfied with his deal of not letting his property be bought by them. Robert then looks at one of his men named Smiley, and signals him with a nod. Smiley then pulls the fake leg from one of his subordinates, which is actually an Uzi gun, and fires at Ellie's men. Surprised by their sudden attack, Ellie then commands his men to take them down and tries to gain the upper hand by having more men and even cars to overpower Robert and his comrades. After a few moments of chaos inside the warehouse, only Ellie is left alive with Robert and his men still standing. His comrades start to get a hold of Ellie, to which he explains to him his points. He does this while cutting Ellie's finger at every point he reveals, leaving Ellie screaming in pain. After the warehouse incident, an artificial skin cell experiment is being performed at Dr. Peyton Westlake's lab. He attempts to recreate the skin of a nose, along with his subordinate Yakadito. After numerous experiments, the artificial skin cell tends to disintegrate after 99 minutes. This frustrates both Peyton and Yakadito, since they don't know what's wrong with their experiment, but Peyton remains optimistic that they are near to perfecting their artificial skin cell. Later that night, Peyton's girlfriend Julie visits him at his apartment, where they laugh at their old photos. They then end their night by making love and enjoying their time together. The following morning, Julie shows Peyton a private memorandum that she found in her office. She explains how she is puzzled by it since it is somehow connected to shady dealings from his boss Louis Strack, to a man named Claude Belisarius, with the name being marked by Julie's coffee cup. She then rushes to go to work, since she is running late. Peyton suddenly follows her on the way and blurts out the thought of them getting married. Unfortunately, she low-key refuses since she explains to him how she is just starting to achieve her dreams at work, and being completely tied to a man is not her priority at the moment. But she continues to tell him that she loves him, even though she isn't ready for marriage. At work, she continues to tell her boss Louis about the memorandum she had found, to which Louis admits that it is needed by him to make his dream a reality. She explains that letting such a crime slip can make her an accessory to the illegal act, but he threatens her instead about a man named Robert Durant. Meanwhile, at Peyton's lab, the light goes out, which leads to their artificial skin cell experiment exceeding the usual 99-minute mark. He then concludes that light is the missing puzzle in their experiment, and the dark is the one that stabilizes their artificial skin cell. As they are celebrating a milestone, Robert and his men suddenly barge into his lab to find the private memorandum that Julie had found. Peyton denies knowing where the memorandum is, leading to Robert's men suffocating Yakadito using plastic. As Peyton begs them to let Yakadito breathe, Robert mercilessly shoots a bullet in his head and ending his life. They then start to electrocute his hands and drown his face in an unknown boiling acidic liquid, which leads to extreme burns on his skin. One of his men finally finds the memorandum, and so they leave Peyton for dead. Being the cruel man that he is, he asks one of them to take a finger from Yakadito. Peyton then realizes that Robert had opened up gas tanks in his lab and sets a fuse that triggers his lighter to blow up the whole lab. At the same time, Julie goes to his lab and sees the whole incident of Peyton's place exploding and being burned by fire. Days after that, she attends Peyton's funeral thinking that he had already passed away due to the explosion. Unknown to all, Peyton, who fell to a nearby river, is alive and had been brought to a hospital. The doctor explains that they had cut off his nerves that transmit pain impulses to ease his pain, but this may lead to an unwanted surge of emotions and rage in him. All of a sudden, Peyton finally wakes up and escapes the hospital using his great strength due to the rush of adrenaline. He then sees Julie walking down the street. Unfortunately, she doesn't recognize him. He instead chooses to go back to his lab, and salvage some equipment that he can use to continue with his experiment. He also finds shelter at an abandoned factory, where he tries to recreate his face again using a burnt photo of him and Julie. After encountering problems, he successfully fixes it. However, the process will take several weeks. As he tries to perfect his skin, he sees his hand and realizes that it is fully burnt. While he grieves alone in the abandoned factory, Julie is still mournful of Peyton's death but is being comforted by his boss Louis. Unknown to her, Peyton is watching her from afar and is enraged seeing her happy and dancing with another man. Not only that, but he also sees Robert and his men at the party, which infuriates him more as he remembers how they destroyed his life. After the party, he starts to tail Rick, one of Robert's men, and kidnaps him in an alleyway. He starts to interrogate him about their boss while threatening him. After getting the answer that he needs, he proceeds to lift Rick's head from the sewers in the middle of the road, leading to his death by being run over by a car. He continues to spy on them, and successfully recreates Polly's hands and face. He then drugs Polly in his sleep and switches place with him at a money drop point with the others to steal the money. Knowing that the money is gone, Robert and the others enter Polly's room. They see him with 2 plane tickets, one of them named after Rio, and being well dressed in a suit. Thinking that Polly had stolen the money from them, they eventually throw Polly out of his window and fall to his death. Days later, Peyton continues to fail in his skin experiment and throws a tantrum in a fit of rage. His computer system suddenly notifies him that his facial reconstruction is finally complete. The time has finally come for him to meet with Julie, and they finally embrace one another by his grave. He then tells her that they can only meet for a limited amount of time, due to having scheduled therapies at the hospital. After that, he proceeds with his revenge by spying on Robert at his home and copying his way of speaking. He then uses Robert's face to rob a convenience store, while plainly showing his face on the CCTV. The event leads to the real Robert being arrested, without knowing the cause of his arrest. On the other hand, Peyton, while still using Robert's face, goes to meet a foreign client at an Asian restaurant. Back at the police department, Robert is finally bailed from his crime and hurriedly goes to the Asian restaurant, as planned with the client. As he runs late to meet the client, Peyton is also running out of time with the face mask and making him habitually touch his face. The client talks for a while which worry him, only to wait for the client to say that he doesn't have the money. With no other choice, he tries his best to threaten the client. After being pressured harshly by him, the client finally surrenders and gives him the money. The real Robert finally comes, and after knowing that a fake Robert is among them, he rushes to go to him and his client's meeting place. As he runs to the revolving doors, he is shocked to see Peyton, who has the same face as him. Peyton, fortunately, gains the upper hand in their fight and knocks Robert down. He tries to yell an alibi to one of Robert's men, who is as confused as Robert as well. All of a sudden, his face mask starts to disintegrate in front of him. Seeing that he's in trouble, he runs for his life while avoiding bullets from Robert and his men. After the incident, he continues to meet with Julie using his face mask and enjoy their time together at a theme park. With his conscience kicking in, he attempts to tell Julie the truth, but he suddenly sees a show about a disfigured man being laughed at by the audience. This makes him change his mind and hide the truth from his girlfriend again. His time finally comes, and he rushes to win a stuffed toy for Julie. Seeing that he wins the game, the owner refuses to give him the stuffed toy since he wasn't stepping behind the line. This greatly angers him, resulting in him hurting the owner and snatching the stuffed toy for Julie. His mask starts to disintegrate again, and so he apologizes to Julie and quickly runs away from her. Puzzled by his actions, Julie still follows him and reaches Peyton's whereabouts. There she finally discovers the truth about Peyton using artificial skin to cover his burns. She calls him out, saying that he can finally show his true face to her, but Peyton still refuses. Back at work, Julie meets with Lewis and tells him that they cannot see each other anymore since Peyton is actually alive. Hearing those words, he tries to save his relationship with her. Out of curiosity, she goes to Lewis's desk and suddenly sees the memorandum that was stolen at Peyton's lab. There she finally realizes that her boss was the mastermind of such crimes that led to the threat to Peyton's life. He then chooses to let her go, for them to use her as a bait to locate Peyton's location. He also informs Robert about this, so that they can finally tie loose ends in their job. Later that day, Julie runs to meet with Peyton, but Robert's men quickly follow her and kidnap her on the spot. They all shower bullets at Peyton, with Robert riding a helicopter and using a grenade launcher to kill him. Back inside the factory, Peyton thinks of a plan to kill Smiley and Rudy. He first holds Rudy captive, and lets him wear a mask with Smiley's face while being tied up. Later on, Smiley sees a tied-up man wearing a mask that looks like him, and so he quickly shoots at him. He then finds out that the man he shot dead is Rudy. Still shocked by this, Peyton sees this as an advantage to beat him up and knock him unconscious. Moments later, Robert tries to handle the situation himself. But as he is about to go down, Peyton holds him tight, to which he orders the pilot to lift the helicopter. Peyton, fortunately, throws one of Robert's men from the helicopter, leaving only him and Robert fighting for their lives. Due to being kicked by Robert, he suddenly falls from the helicopter. Luckily, he hangs on a hook that saved his life. The pilot tries to wiggle him out of balance, but he strongly holds on. Robert and his pilot then try to endanger his life on the highway, to which he lands on a truck. He quickly thinks of a way to kill Robert by hooking the airplane on top of a truck. This results in the helicopter being pulled by the truck, leading to it crashing into the top of a tunnel. After that, he disguises himself once again as Robert. However, Lewis sees through his plan and takes off his mask, letting Julie see his deformed face. Lewis continues to make fun of him, and their fight eventually turns physical, with Lewis seeming to be advantageous since he isn't afraid of heights. In the middle of their fight, Julie is pushed by Lewis's thug, where her handcuff is fortunately caught on a steel bar. Seeing this, he attempts to save her using a cable and a hook, while killing Lewis's thug in the process. After a few more fights, he finally ends Lewis's life by letting him fall to his death. As the two enter the elevator, he is still ashamed of his disfigured face, but Julie insists that she wants to look at him. He explains that no one can ever love who he is behind the mask without feeling pity for him. He then decides to end his relationship with her and let Julie love a man who isn't a monster like him. As he walks away, she tries to catch up with him, but she fails to find him anymore, since Peyton had used a mask with a different face to mix into the crowd. He then accepts his new life and vows to fight crime as a person named Darkman. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe my channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video.